today. So jumping into this topic. So it's no surprise, right? I actually started thinking about this topic even before the whole pandemic hit, back in March, April, because more and more product managers were going remote. I saw, many different companies I knew people working at were going remote. I saw my teams going more and more remote, whether that was the developers or the designers or even the product managers. And so, I kind of built these slides and this information, this webinar from my experience across 4 different companies, as I mentioned before, that had various approaches to this kind of remote distributed teams thing. So, kind of recapping a little bit of that history, sometimes I had quality engineers in Ukraine, developers around the United States, over in India, up in Europe as well. Sometimes product people, distributed around the country, sometimes using remote resources, even like TopTal or Fiverr, to help fill in the capacity that our team didn't have. So very, very familiar with leveraging remote teams, working on remote teams. But really until pretty recently, this kind of whole COVID thing, I was the person on that remote team that was still in the office most of the time. So I was the one, kind of holding down the fort, at headquarters, sometimes going and visiting the people remotely or bringing those people in the office. But I was that person, kind of more in the office until, of course, March, April. And so, I kind of have this unique perspective where I've been now on both sides of the table. I've seen what's worked. I've seen what hasn't worked. And that's really what I wanted to bring everyone today. A lot of people now, of course, have had experience with remote work, but there are some things I've seen that are kind of great patterns and anti-patterns with being a remote product manager. So I'm going to jump in and share some of those today. Also, one note too, please feel free to chat in questions at any point. I'm going to answer those at the end, just so I can kind of handle them all at once. But please feel free to shot in those into the chat window as you think of them, and I'll definitely get to them at the end. So with that, let's jump into a few things that really make a great remote product manager. So, I don't consider myself in this category yet, but they are, traits that I'm always thinking about, that I'm trying to get better at, that I'm seeing, kind of others around me exhibit well. And so trying to capture all those. And the first one is to leverage Slack or Teams or chat or whatever you use as your chat software responsibly. So as a product manager, right, you get a lot of information, right? You get information from your leadership team, you get information from your customers, your marketing team, your support team. When you're in the office, if someone comes and tells you something, let's say your support team comes over and tells you about, an idea they have, or your leadership team, maybe your CEO comes over and tells you about an idea you have. It's not normal practice to shout that in the office as loud as you can for everyone to hear, right? You don't go run over and yell in one of your developers' ears, hey, here's an idea. Here's, something I just heard from the support team. But that's what so many people do with chat, right? They take the messages or the information that's coming in, they treat it like an inbox, and then they put it in their outbox and they Slack it off or chat it off to someone else, just because it's so easy and so tempting to do, right? You've gotten it off of your plate and you put it on someone else's plate. But this obviously has a lot of negative consequences. So what I really advise and what I see great product managers do, right, is they first take a breath, first process that information a bit, think about where that information fits. Is this something that's a critical bug that I do need to share right away? Or is it, just another idea for the backlog that I need to prioritize, I need to refine, I need to think about more? Most of the things will be in that second category, right? Will be the things that you want to wait a little bit longer to share. You want to find the right, agile ceremonies, maybe your next sprint planning or grooming meeting to talk about. And so, really just quite simply, it's about the quality of the communication, not the quantity. You aren't doing anyone any favors by being the fastest at sending off messages on Slack as a remote product manager. Take your time, think about what you're sharing, and think about the impact on the person you're sending it to. Are they going to, expect to have to go work on this right away? or can you make it clear that you're just sharing an idea and it's maybe something to share feedback on in the next week? So share things like timing and urgency, very clearly in your message if you do send that message. So be responsible. There's a lot of power in chat, but be responsible with it and make sure you're not just shooting off that information as quickly as you receive it. Another one that I've seen people surprisingly avoid, even in these last few months, is it's if you're having these chat conversations with a group, right? So let's say like we're building a new feature, and we're talking about some of the acceptance criteria, some of the things that the developers need to build into that feature, or maybe we're talking about some issue that's come up. I've seen teams and product managers go for 20, 30, 40 minutes back and forth with chats. And during that back and forth, certain people, go away from their computer. Certain people come back in halfway through the conversation. Sometimes people get tagged into that chat conversation. People ask the same questions again and again because they don't scroll up. Really, it's a simple rule that I have. But if you see like this back and forth happening, and usually if it's longer than 5 minutes or longer than like 5 chat back and forths, just call for a quick video call. So say, hey, we're gonna talk about this feature. 5-minute call, 10-minute call. We're gonna talk about this issue. 10-minute call. Let's jump on right now. And most chat software, right, that you use has just a quick video call feature, or you can set that up super fast, right? There's just so much that can be lost in chat and so much confusion that can be added. If you are talking about something that needs a little bit more nuance or a little bit more information, just call for a video call. You kind of think, you try and avoid video calls because you think they might be too much or they might take too long. But actually, it'll reduce the chance that you guys are miscommunicating. It'll reduce the chance that a different person kind of gets part of the story but not the full story. These video calls are at least 5 times more effective. I think that's an underestimate, because you can have 3-4 people discussing, clarifying quickly, getting some action items, and then ending the call and being done with it. So video calls almost always worth it as a remote product manager. Of course, don't do them every minute of every day, but when you see this happening on chat or over email, this level of confusion, jump on a video call. Preparing for meetings. This, might be a surprise for some people, but, with this big adjustment to remote work or work from home, it is a big adjustment, right? Your home and your work are kind of colliding, right? And as a product manager, I know at times you feel this pressure that, there's not as much pressure maybe to prepare for a remote meeting, a video call, as there is for, a boardroom meeting. Like imagine you're in your office and you have to present to the CEO, the chief technology officer, the head of product, you have to present to the developers. You want to look really good, right? You want to prepare, you want to know what you're talking about. But for whatever reason, when you're on a video call, even if you have your video on, even if you're presenting to those same people, there's kind of this level of separation that makes it feel like it's not, as real or as serious, especially when, I'm 5 feet away from my couch or 5 feet away from my TV or my bed. There's this pressure to not prepare as much for meetings. But honestly, even in the past 3 months at my company, you can tell when someone doesn't prepare and doesn't kind of put in that homework ahead of time. And so, it's really no excuse being at home to fail to prepare for those meetings. And so the thing I encourage people to do is create as much of a work environment as you can at home. So if you have multiple rooms in your house, great, make one of those kind of your office. And when you go in there, it's work time, right? That's not the room that also has a TV in it or has a bed in it. If you don't have multiple rooms, kind of set up different rules for yourself. Maybe, get dressed, right? You can see I'm wearing a polo shirt today. I could have worn a t-shirt or a hoodie or something like that. I'm at home. but just do whatever it takes to kind of create that work mode in your mind. And that will kind of also just trigger you, right, to prepare in the same ways as you would for that in-person meeting with your full team. Still have those good meeting, practices of having a brief agenda, clarifying what the purpose of the meeting is, the goals, the action items, do all those same things. It's silly to say, but I've seen many, many people as they transition to remote stray away from that preparation. So be on the other side of it, prepare for meetings still as a remote product manager. Taking breaks. So, I just covered one example of kind of people not taking, it serious enough. I've also seen people, and I put myself in this bucket, take it almost, too seriously. Why? Now that you're remote, now that you're, having lots of time, potentially lots of free time, it's really easy to just, go heads down and forget to eat lunch until 3 p.m. or, forget to go for a walk or get out of your chair until it's starting to get dark, right? It sounds silly maybe to some people, but it is really easy for these new people adjusting to remote product management to just get fully absorbed. There's always something going on, right? There's always chat. There's always a conversation to join. There's always something as a remote product manager to jump into to do. And so kind of my hints here, the things I've seen work for people, myself included, are honestly, it's simple, but create deliberate breaks in your schedule. So, if I showed my calendar here right now, you'd see I have a break for lunch. I have a walking break in the morning. I have, another maybe podcast break in the afternoon. Create this time, these breaks in your day to just go walk around, go do something you enjoy, listen to an audio book, go cook lunch, go walk. Obviously, some of us can't go to restaurants or coffee shops yet, but when you can, or if you can, go to get a coffee at a coffee shop near you. Do something to break up your day. I can't tell you how many times over the past 3 or 4 months that when I get up and I go for a walk and go around my neighborhood or listen to a podcast, I come back with a few other ideas that I wouldn't have thought of if I was just sitting at my computer. So take breaks. They will actually lead to higher productivity than you just going heads down and trying to knock out 10, 12 hours of work straight. That's not a formula for success as a remote product manager. So I mentioned you do have this kind of flexibility now as a remote product manager. So again, you might feel that pressure to jump in on all those conversations, but you do have more control, right? There is no way your boss can come tap you on the shoulder, right? There is no way someone can come, stand near your computer. You're at home, right? Like, of course they can chat you, they can email you, they can call you. I get it. But you have more control as a remote worker, as a remote product manager than you ever had before. And so what that means is you have a lot more quiet time, or the ability to carve out quiet time, than you ever did before. I've talked about this a lot in a blog post I wrote called, How the Best Product Managers Manage Downtime. I'll send out these slides after so everyone can check that out. But if even you Google that, you'll see a few ways that I talk about, as you have downtime, you can take advantage of that as a product manager. Well, as a remote product manager, you can create this downtime more easily. So, be deliberate. Again, set time aside for thinking about, the goals of this sprint, how the team's moving along, the things that are coming up next, your goals as an organization and how you're progressing towards those. Even, you have more time to carve out half a day now to think about next quarter. I know we're, coming up on the end of the second quarter here, at least in my company. And so we've done a lot of thinking, and I've done a lot of heads down time on, what are those important projects that are going to make, our business move in the right direction next quarter. So, again, you have a lot more autonomy over your schedule. Even if you don't feel like it now, you do as a remote worker, and you can carve out these big chunks of time to really go heads down and leverage this quiet time to plan. So few interruptions, less people tapping you on the shoulder. Make sure to take advantage of that as a remote product manager. So this one's a bit tricky, right? I mentioned before, on the going and taking a walk, kind of getting out, thinking. But this one means a little bit more changing your environment. Again, things are opening up now in some places, in some countries. So take this with a grain of salt, when you can, if you can. Uh, Remote work doesn't mean exclusively working from home. In fact, that doesn't work for most people for the reasons I've talked about so far. So what I really recommend for people who are committing to remote work or who are, kind of in remote work for the first time is find a few places around you that you can, go and change things up. So, usually for most of the people I've worked with remotely, once, twice a week, maybe even they're going to a coffee shop, they're going to a co-working space, a library, really wherever you want to find that quiet space and Wi-Fi and inspiration, go for it. And so, kind of find a few places that are your go-tos and, just go between them, when you need, a boost, when you're maybe thinking about next quarter, get your head out of your day-to-day world in your home, go to, the library nearby you, or go to that great coffee shop and think differently, right? Think, more towards the future instead of the day-to-day of product management. It's really easy to get stuck in the sprint to sprint, ticket to ticket, story to story type of product management. So change up your environment as a remote product manager, and it'll actually change up your thinking and give you that creativity boost. So fingers crossed on this one that we are not working exclusively from home forever as remote product managers, or just almost everyone now, and people will be able to take advantage of this tip in the not too distant future. The last one here is a big one. So remote doesn't mean remote 24/7. This is, a weird world we've been in over the past 3 months where, we're not able to go into our offices at all for most people. We're not able to see our teams in person for most people in most countries. That's not typical remote work. So thinking back on a few of the companies that I've worked for, one of my first ones was a company called Vistaprint Digital. We had a team of developers out of Tunisia. And we did a really cool thing where when they first joined our company, we brought them over, and I think this was about 8 to 10 developers over to the United States. And they spent, I believe, about 3, maybe even 4 weeks in Silver Spring, Maryland, just north of Washington, D.C. And we got to spend time with them, of course, in the office, but we also got to spend a ton of, bonding time outside of the office. We got dinner together, right? We went on outings together. We had, weekends, picnics and stuff like that together. It was a great way to really strengthen that team. And then when they went and worked, when they went back to Tunisia and we worked together, yeah, they were on a video call, or yeah, they were emailing or chatting us, but I could, kind of put not only a face to the name, but a personality. I know what they care about, what their goals are, what their career trajectory is, where they want to go, those type of things. And so, that's just one story of many that I've had with kind of these, kind of in-person meetings. And so a few ones that I've seen that are pretty popular for remote workers, if you're in the same region. So at my current company, ICX Media, we have some people in Maryland, in Baltimore, some in Washington, D.C., some in Virginia. So these are states that are all close together. And so, it's great to try and bring people together every couple weeks for the planning meeting. So when we're talking about planning the next sprint, when we're talking about what's important for our team, it's really great to have everyone together and, go and grab lunch that day, right? And kind of, get obviously work done that day, but also bonding as a team. Another similar one, a lot of teams and a lot of companies have, all hands meetings. It depends on the size of your company, but these are pretty popular in the startup world, to have one each month where you review the business, you review, maybe some key items from different teams. A great time to bring everyone, including the remote folks, in. Again, grab lunch, grab drinks after work, grab coffee together, whatever it is, build those relationships. And then the last one here is a little bit bigger. So of course I've talked about, some really remote teams. So, I've worked with developers out of Pakistan, out of India, of course, out of, Eastern Europe in many cases on the quality side. But, sometimes even people pretty far apart in the United States. It's really big to bring, your whole company together, especially if your company is that distributed, as I just talked about, together, maybe quarterly, twice a year, if it's a really big offsite, maybe once a year. But what's really cool here is when you do this offsite, what I would recommend, don't do it in the same city that your headquarters is in. So ICX Media is in Washington, D.C., but we would not do it in Washington, D.C. You want to pick a kind of neutral location, typically a pretty fun city for people to go to, pretty easy to get to city, and make that the offsite. Make it a week-long event. Plan some things, of course, for the business and kind of getting everyone excited about where the business is going, but also spend as much time planning kind of the social agenda, the ways that people can learn more about each other, the way that people can meet new people in the company that they've only seen over video before, dinners, drinks, all those type of things. Those are just as important as the actual business. And so I know I've spent a lot of time on this one, but again, we're in a weird spot right now with not being able to actually meet in real life. Again, that will pass, that will go away. Just keep this in mind. It is very important if you're a remote product manager to find time to actually meet with your team in person. Again, depends if you're in the same country. It might be a little less frequent if you're not, but find the time to meet with your team in real life. All right, so those were 7 things that you should keep in mind to be a good remote product manager. Let's cover a few that are bad. So these are those anti-patterns I talked about before as a product manager. So we talked about, kind of relaying that information right away being bad. And the first kind of thing to do as a product manager, kind of process the information that comes in chat, make sure you don't share everything right away. But there's another bad thing I've seen remote product managers do, and this is hovering over their development teams on chat. And so what this means is the developers will be having a conversation. They'll maybe be clarifying some details or some ways that they want to build a feature between themselves. And they're not asking product for any questions, but product jumps in and starts trying to manage that conversation, right? Tries to solve it, right then, because they're anxious. They want to make sure there's no confusion. They want to make sure I'm making my point heard and I'm going to jump in. That definitely rubs people the wrong way. Especially developers do not appreciate, having this product manager kind of hovering over their shoulder, in the chat room, waiting to jump in on a topic. That's exhausting. That makes them nervous. Often the product manager will jump in with information that's either not helpful or incorrect because they weren't being asked and it was maybe a technical discussion, not a product discussion. So the bad product manager, remote product manager, has to kind of jump into every conversation of what I call over participate in chat. So don't do this. Make sure you kind of set clear goals, that you write clear tickets, clear user stories with clear requirements and clear acceptance criteria, and just get out of the way, right? Your team will ask you questions if they have it. You have stand-ups hopefully every day. Those are the chances to further clarify or answer questions. Don't push into every single conversation. That will really burn out your team. And I've seen that one happen quite a few times before. On the opposite side, you don't want to be unavailable. So, everyone is remote, remote product management. You have a lot more flexibility with your time, but you still need to communicate when you are and aren't available. So for example, the walks I talked about before, the lunches, I have that on my calendar, right? People can see that. They know, oh, Alex is, going for a walk, or he, is grabbing lunch. In our company, people even post that in just our general channel. So if they have to walk away for a bit, if they have to go run an errand, if they're taking a break for a couple hours, just let people know, right? So a bad product manager, a remote product manager, just kind of, disappears, right? So you need to still be available as a product manager for those questions when they come up. So you don't want to, of course, inject yourself, like I said before, at the wrong times, but you want to be there for quick answers, because your developers are probably going to be blocked, right? If they are ready to pick up a new task and priorities aren't clear, or the ticket, we thought it was clear at planning, but some new details came up and I need some clarification as a developer. I'm going to go ask the product manager. The product manager isn't there, or I have to wait 2 or 3 hours, and there isn't some backup plan to go to another product manager when I'm not available, which is another thing I'd suggest. That really slows down the team, right? That makes it kind of progress, of course, slowed down, but you can even worse than that sometimes get divergence from goals. So your developers might start making some of those decisions themselves, which is okay a lot of the times. Again, if your goals are very clear, if we're all on the same page. But if this happens more than once, it happens twice, it happens 3 times, it happens 4 times, you start getting a little bit off the path, and then more and more off the path. And then, pretty soon, because the developer answered 4 or 5 of their own clarification questions without this, product manager being available, you're on a completely different path. And then when that feature, is ready to get tested, it'll be a shock for that product manager, because it'll be something very different than what they expected. So be highly available. This doesn't mean you have to chat back everything in 1 or 2 minutes. That's not fair to a product manager. But be clear about when you are available. Put it on the shared calendar, put it in Slack, just make it clear when you're taking breaks, or give a backup plan, right? When I'm not available, if you can't get an answer from me in 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, whatever your threshold is, go to this other product manager, go to this other person. So be available. It can help out a lot. And if you are not available, you'll feel the pain for sure. Another one that is a place that a lot of product managers, new remote product managers, get into trouble, and frankly, just people in general in remote work get into trouble, is we've already talked a lot about how blurred lines get when you're working remotely, when you're working from home, when you're working a few feet away from your couch, your bed, your TV. It can get really easy to, kind of really annoy people by sending them messages that are convenient at your time when you're working, but are not convenient for others. So there's a few things here. One, for example, I'll give a personal example here. I love to work early in the morning, right? So I'll be on my computer by 6:45, 7 a.m. I have a lot of things that I'm working on or kind of coming up with plans for, but I deliberately wait to chat people or message people until 8:30, 9 o'clock, right? Because I know if I put a chat message in and maybe they don't have their phone on silent and it wakes them up, or an email triggers an alert, or they feel that because they got it at 6:45 in the morning, they have to respond to that message. That's really bad. Same thing on the other side. If you're sending messages, if you like to work from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m., keep in mind that most people don't, right? They're taking care of their kids, they're unwinding, they're doing they're exercising, right? They're kind of enjoying their free time. And so this is even more of an important point when you have teams that work across different time zones. So if you have remote people in other countries, you need to have conversations about what are times that we all are online, where we all work synchronously. Maybe that's a 3 or 4 hour block in the middle of the day. And then what are the times where, if I send you a chat or an email, it might be 12 hours. It might be a little longer before I get a response because, I just chatted you at 2 a.m. Or something like that. And so, be very clear with the rest of the remote team about expectations about when we're all working together, when we're working, more asynchronously, and then just be smart as a product manager about when you chat your team. So really try not to chat them very early or very late unless it is something's broken or that they already are online. Maybe they're chatting in a group channel and you want to Slack them directly. Those are the only times you really want to chat someone outside of those kind of shared working hours. So please respect other people's schedules. This is another thing that I've seen people get into trouble with, and definitely burn people out on. And I'm talking about chat here mostly. Same thing with email, same thing with phone. So I know I've worked for people where phone, I've gotten phone calls, 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. at night, or very early in the morning. Of course, that's even more disruptive than chat or email. So be very, very careful. Use that only for these critical communications, or if you know someone is already online. Another one we talked about a little bit before in the things to do, where I said, prepare for meetings. On the other side, something I've seen with, kind of bad remote product managers, right, is just starting to lose that professionalism, right? So, not preparing for meetings is obviously the other side of it, but even just, kind of rolling out of bed, meetings, right before a meeting, wearing sweatshirts and sweatpants to meetings, like, it's not about the clothes, honestly. And, I'm like anyone, I'll wear t-shirts some days, but again, it kind of trickles down, right? It starts to blur that line between work and life. It just kind of, it gets into the planning process. I've seen it. It sounds silly because I'm not at all a formal dress person. I've worked for startups my whole life. But when someone has this kind of casual approach to everything, they lose that professionalism that they would have in front of the rest of their team. Things start to slip, right? They start to not think about their goals as much. They don't plan ahead. They stop thinking about those objectives as much. So maintain that professionalism as much as you can. Everyone, of course, will have a day when they sleep in too late, right? And they have to jump onto a meeting. Like, yes, that just don't make it a pattern, or else it will start to show up in some of the other aspects of work. It sounds silly, but I have seen it happen more than once, and it sometimes has led to some bad outcomes. It's easy to slip when you're, again, a few feet away from your TV, from your bed. So try and maintain that professionalism. Sometimes it's as easy as defining your work area, putting on a polo shirt every so often, a pair of pants instead of sweatpants, those type of things. So maintain the professionalism. So those were the things to do as a remote product manager and the things to avoid as a remote product manager. So I really hope you enjoyed this content. I see there are a few questions in chat that I will jump over to in a second here. So again, if you enjoyed this content, please do check out themodernproductmanager.com. You'll find blog posts there. You'll find links to my YouTube channel. You'll find links to my Medium, which has even more blogs. And then you'll also find some courses. So, I put a code here, webinar 30, to get 30% off. I have 2 courses right now, one for people trying to become a product manager for the first time, and another one for people who are already product managers who are just trying to level up or improve their product management skills. So check those out. I also do have a bunch of free videos with those courses too. So hopefully you find some great free content, even if you aren't ready to purchase the whole course. And use that code definitely if you decide to purchase to get 30% off. And one more thing before I jump over to the questions. I mentioned this in my email. I picked 5 random people to give away a free copy of my book to. So this is my book, Disrupting Yourself. So if you see your name there, congratulations. You'll get a link after the call with a few different ways to access this book. If you aren't familiar with it, I actually wrote it near the end of last year, before this whole coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. But it actually has a lot of things that will hopefully help you out in today's crazy world where things are changing faster than ever, where you need to keep learning. That is all what this book is about. It's about challenging yourself. It's about learning. It's about how you manage a world in which you could have, 5, 10 different jobs over the course of your career. So congratulations to those folks. Look out